In a stunning turnaround in what seems like the unofficial end of the Matt Gaetz ethics report saga, news has broken that the House Ethics Committee has quietly voted to release the ethics report into Matt Gaetz's alleged sexual misconduct and drug use that caused him to abruptly quit the House ahead of its imminent release last month. According to reporting, the report is expected to be released after the final House votes are cast for the year and as members head home for the holidays, those sources said. Gaetz, unsurprisingly, did not take too kindly to the news, issuing a sprawling screed on Twitter. The Biden-Garland DOJ spent years reviewing allegations that I committed various crimes. I was charged with nothing, fully exonerated, not even a campaign finance violation, and the people investigating me hated me. Then, the very witnesses DOJ deemed not credible were assembled by House Ethics to repeat their claims absent any cross-examination or challenge from me or my attorneys. I've had no chance to ever confront any accusers. I've never been charged. I've never been sued. Instead, House Ethics will reportedly post a report online that I have no opportunity to debate or rebut as a former member of the body. In my single days, I often sent funds to women I dated, even some I never dated but who asked. I dated several of those women for years. I never had sexual conduct with someone under 18. Any claim that I have would be destroyed in court, which is why no such claim was ever made in court. My 30s were an era of working very hard and playing very hard too. It's embarrassing, though not criminal, that I probably partied, womanized, drank, and smoked more than I should have earlier in life. I have a different life now, but at least I didn't vote for the CRs that fuck over the country. Now, I'm not saying that Gaetz is worried, but that is not exactly the statement of someone who's not. Also, you gotta love the desperate whataboutism at the end. But at least I didn't vote for CRs that fuck over the country. That's a reference to voting for a continuing resolution that commits the cardinal sin of keeping the government open. Look, not for nothing, but if I was faced with the prospect of a report being exposed that may or may not lay out alleged sexual misconduct with a minor, I might put my anti-American fever dreams aside for just a quick beat while I figure out my own life first. Just, for starters. Also, Gaetz suggests that he was, quote, fully exonerated because the DOJ opted not to pursue charges, and he's correct that he wasn't charged, but he's not correct that a failure to charge at the DOJ means that he was exonerated. Here's my Legal Breakdown co-host Glenn Kirshner discussing that point here.
It's not unusual, take it from a 30-year career prosecutor. Crimes are committed quite often, and there is never a charge brought. Sometimes the crimes aren't solved. We don't know who the perpetrator is. Sometimes we have strong evidence of who the perpetrator is. However, we don't have enough admissible evidence in court to actually secure an indictment. Sometimes we have enough to secure an indictment, but we don't believe we have a reasonable likelihood of success on the merits. In other words, a guilty verdict at trial. So there is this sliding scale, and the evidence moves up as you make your way through the criminal justice process. This is from a prosecutor's perspective. So, he may very well have committed crimes. Indeed, what we know is that a federal judge ruled there was probable cause that Matt Gaetz had evidence of crime on his cell phone, in his cell phone, and it was seized and it was searched. But there were some potential witness problems, is what I have heard over the years in the case, and the Department of Justice couldn't quite get to a point where they believed they had proof beyond a reasonable doubt such that they could win a conviction at trial. Not unusual in my experience that cases fall out along that sliding scale of evidence before they ever make it to trial.
So do I wish that the DOJ was less focused on the optics of politicization than it was to actually upholding the law? Of course. But let's not delude ourselves into thinking that the lack of an indictment is somehow akin to a finding of innocence, because it's not. Going back to Gaetz's tweet, he laments the fact that House Ethics will reportedly post a report online that I have no opportunity to debate or rebut as a former member of the body. But the reason that he'll have no opportunity to debate or rebut is because he resigned. And the reason he resigned is expressly to deprive the House Ethics Committee of jurisdiction over him. So he can complain about not being a member of Congress all he wants, but no one forced him to resign. He chose to resign in an effort to block the report from being released. So he can lean on this flawed logic until he's blue in the face, but if he's looking for the person responsible for depriving him of the ability to debate this report, he might want to consult a mirror. And look, a few points to remember here ahead of what I'm sure will be a rally round the flag effect for the former Republican congressman among his former Republican colleagues and members of the right-wing media, considering nothing gets the right energized more than preventing the cancellation of one of their own. First, the Ethics Committee is split, half Democrats and half Republicans, which means that inherently, members of Gaetz' own party had to find it necessary to vote in favor of releasing the report. Second, the House is in Republicans' control. What does it say that the Ethics Committee continued its work under a Republican speaker who didn't move to have this report shut down? Third, Matt Gaetz may very well be planning a run for governor of Florida in the future. Don't you imagine that voters across the political spectrum have a vested interest in knowing who it is they might be voting for? And I'm sorry, but I refuse to be roped into this idea that revulsion to Gaetz' actions are partisan. If he was engaged in sexual misconduct with a minor, as has been alleged, I'd imagine that conservative voters might care about that too. Hell, even the alt-right, the far-right, the QAnon right seems to have some strong feelings about politicians who engage in sexual misconduct with minors, meaning if it happened, everybody has a vested interest in knowing. And finally, the last point is that the ethics report is a taxpayer-funded report. We paid for it, and therefore we have the right to see what's in it, a point that I covered with Speaker Jeffries during a recent live event in Los Angeles. That ethics report was still a taxpayer-funded report. Is there any likelihood that we'll be able to see it, knowing full well that Matt Gaetz, as a career politician, is likely to return to politics, even if it's in the capacity of running for governor of Florida, for example? But to my earlier point, that was a taxpayer-funded report. Do the people of America have the right to be able to see what was in it?
Yes, I think the senators were very clear. Both Democratic senators and Republican senators, and many of us in the House took the same position, that certainly when he was the nominee for the highest law enforcement position in the land, it was information that should have been made publicly available to the Senate and to the American people. You know, Matt Gaetz is unlikely to be finished with his pursuit for public office or even pursuit for a position within the administration that may not relate to a high stakes confirmation battle. So, you know, to be continued as it relates to that particular report, I do think the broader principle at issue that was a test, an early test of the resilience of, you know, our constitutional system did relate to, you know, Matt Gaetz' nomination being put forward and there being such a backlash, including from some Senate Republicans on the other side of the aisle.
So while I understand that there's not much comfort to us in the way of good governance these days, one small consolation is knowing that the ethics report is coming out. And when it does, I'll make sure that its contents are given the light of day that it deserves. Before you go, just a quick note, if you'd like to see more of my content, which is always free of advertising, sponsorships, and paywalls, please make sure to subscribe to this channel using the subscribe button right here on the screen. And if you'd like to support my work even further, you can grab a copy of my instant #1 New York Times selling book, Shameless, available for sale right now. That link is also on the screen. Thanks so much for watching.